Welcome to Sweden and Arsenalen, the Swedish Tankmuseum. 60 years ago, this tank started to do the first trials with the pre-production models in 1963. And I will give you a short background about why the tank came to production, and later in the film we will dig into what's inside this fantastic vehicle. When the S-tank was designed in the 1950s, the idea was to create a new main battle tank for the Swedish Army. And the idea was to have a fixed gun in the chassis, a very low profile in order to hide the vehicle from the enemy, and also with a heavy frontal protection. So that was the sort of main characteristic for the tank. So with a fixed gun in the chassis, you could have it automatic loaded. So at the rear there is the ammunition, in the middle the crew compartment, and the frontal part of the vehicle is the engine, gearbox, etc. So that's the basic layout for the tank. In a normal tank where you have a chassis and a turret, there is a driver for driving the chassis and there is a gunner for using the gun in the turret. In this tank it's completely different. So in the turreted tank you can use the turret to sideways traverse the gun without moving the chassis, or they could do that independently. In this tank you move the complete vehicle when you are moving the gun. So the gunner, who is also the driver of the vehicle, is using his controls in order to traverse the vehicle sideways, moving the complete vehicle. And when he wants the gun to go up or down, he's using the same controls. And the gun is very fixed and stable in this. So it's a very accurate movement of the gun, using the hydraulics within the system and with the tank standing still. So he can aim with his sight, looking out through the gun sight, aim and fire at ranges of 2,000–3,000 meters without any problem, and there's hit directly on the target. And since the gun is automatic loaded, the gunner is also the loader, so he presses buttons if he wants to fire an armored piercing round or high explosive, depends on what kind of target he's aiming at. If the gunner would become injured, or for whatever reason he cannot see the target, this tank is world unique, since the commander has the same controls, so he can take over and do the same from his position, aiming, loading and firing the gun using the same basic elements. And so the driver and the commander that have the same controls, and that is unique for this tank. When you're driving a normal tank compared to this one, a tank with a turret and a chassis, you have a big engine, a big gearbox and a driver, and you can drive the tank without thinking about the turret. In this case, with this tank, driving this one, you need to have everything working together, otherwise you cannot drive the tank. And this tank is, from my opinion, the most complicated tank in the world, and we will look into what's inside in a minute. But driving the tank, you're using the same controls as you did when firing with the tank. You're using an automatic gearbox to drive it. There are two engines on the inside powering the vehicle, and it's very easy to drive. It's smooth, and it's a fantastic vehicle to be inside and drive it, even if it's a bit cramped. So you drive it using the superimposed steering with differential system to drive it, and you have the steering is very accurate. Other vehicles heavy vehicles, they have the same type of steering. If you compare to a Centurion or Chieftain or Leopard 2, they have the same basic idea of steering as this one. But this tank also can use the clutch and brake system, which is normally used on lighter vehicles. So you drive towards the enemy or against somewhere you are going, and all of a sudden you spot an enemy 90 degrees to the side. You can then use the clutch and brake steering and just turn it, and in 2 seconds you have the tank in that direction, ready to aim and fire the gun. And that's something very special to use in this tank. So you have 2 separate steering systems within the same vehicle. What is also unique about this vehicle is that you have the driver on this seat and a rear driver behind him. So the driver is driving the vehicle forward, and he is also the gunner. And the rear driver is the guy who is driving the vehicle if we want to reverse in a very quick way. So he can drive the vehicle the same speed backwards. In order to drive the vehicle, you're using the gear selector up to the right, and this is the steering equipment for the gunner and driver. So when traversing the vehicle or the gun sideways, do like this, and up and down you're using this like a motorcycle handle in order to tell the vehicle which angle you want to have it. And you look out through this periscope, and this is the sight. And when driving the vehicle, you're doing the same, driving like this and up and down, depending on if you want to go up or downhill. So it's very easy to use and to drive. And using the clutch brake system, you are doing to the angles to the left or right, and then you have this very quick steering sideways. And this is the commander's position, and he has the same controls in order to drive and fire the gun, same type of periscope and sights. So the commander can take over and drive the tank and use it all by himself, which is world unique. This tank only needs 1 crew member to operate everything. Now we will take a look on the inside of this vehicle, and in order to do that we need to remove this locking pin, the hatches on the front, and lift the power pack. So let's go to another tank and do that. So the first step is to remove the gun, and that takes maximum 2 hours. There's a few bolts on the outside and 1 on the inside. You just twist it a bit and lift it out, and the total weight is about 950 kilos. Here you can see the bayonet locking. As you can see, the gun barrel is quite long. It's 1 meter longer than a standard Centurion gun, and that is why this tank is very good at shooting at long ranges. Next step is to remove the 2 hatches and the gun support. It's a couple of hours in total, a number of bolts that you need to remove, and these 3 parts are quite heavy. After removing the gun and the hatches, we are now ready to lift, almost. Before we do that, we need to remove a few hoses and cables. There's fuel, there's coolant, and there is hydraulic fluid that you have to disconnect and put the lift beam on the power pack, and then we can lift it out. In order to lift the power pack, you need a special beam so you can tilt the power pack when you lift it out of the tank, and it's the same procedure when you lift it back into the tank again. You need to tilt it in order to get it in the right position. We use a hydraulic crane with a capacity of 6.5 tons in order to lift the power pack, and it's very smooth to do it. And finally, there are 3 stands that you mount on the engine mounts. You can put the complete power pack on the ground and do work and service on it. This is the complete power pack lifted out of the vehicle, and the weight in total is about 4 tons. The basic idea with the design of this power pack was to keep the profile of the vehicle as low as possible in order to give a frontal protection that was very good, but also to have the possibility to have the gun mounted right here. So this power pack is quite low compared to many others, and they did this with the diesel engine, the piston engine on this side, the right side, and the gas turbine on the other side. And these 2 engines, they are combined in a gearbox in front of the both engines. So the power from the piston engine and from the gas turbine goes together into the main gearbox. In total, this power pack has, in fact, 6 different gearboxes combined working together and 2 engines. So it's a quite complicated power pack. It's possible to drive the tank with only the piston engine, but the problem is that you only have 290 horsepower from the piston engine, and the weight of the tank is 43 tons, so you don't have enough power to use it as you would like. You can drive on flat ground, that is no problem. But in order to use the tank as you need to with the high performance, etc., you need to have the extra power, and that is powered by the gas turbine. Both engines run on the same diesel. It's the same diesel system, ordinary diesel, nothing special. And at the front there is a steering device. You have 1 gearbox on the piston engine, 1 main gearbox, combining both engines together. This power pack is the latest version, the C version of the S-Tank, with the piston engine is a Detroit 2-stroke diesel engine, 290 horsepower. It's a very common diesel engine used in many armored fighting vehicles. And this upgrade was done in the late 1980s, early 1990s, because the previous engine, the Rolls-Royce K60, a 6-cylinder with the post pistons, these engines, they were not powerful enough and not as reliable as they wanted to. But with this engine, it became a much better tank. This piston engine provides about 2,000 RPMs when using it, and together with a gas turbine, a Boeing or Caterpillar 553, 490 horsepower, and this runs between 20 to 40,000 RPMs. So they combined the 2,000 RPM with 40,000 RPM in the gearbox in the front. From the beginning there was a Boeing 502 gas turbine, but that was also considered not powerful enough, so they quite early in the production they upgraded to this 553, which is a lot more powerful engine. And they are used both in combination all the time, which increases the fuel consumption of the tank. As said, it's possible to drive the tank with only the piston engine, not that powerful, but you can drive it, you can use the vehicle. You can also, if emergency, drive with only the gas turbine. But when you do that, you don't have any of the hydraulic systems working, so you need to be quite skilled to operate with the emergency sticks when driving the tank, but it is possible, but nothing that I would recommend. You can also use the gas turbine to start the piston engine. If something is not working as it should on the piston engine, you can use the gas turbine, start that up, and with the gearbox you can start the piston engine. That's an emergency operation you can use, but you cannot do the other way around. You cannot start the gas turbine with the piston engine. That's not possible. So this is the basic layout for the vehicle, the power pack, and it's a very complicated, as said, with a lot of components working together and a lot of electronics, a lot of hydraulics that can fail, but it's very interesting to work with. The gas turbine, the Caterpillar 553, is a quite small engine, only this big, but a lot of power, 490 horsepower as maximum, with the inlet, the air here, and the exhaust out there. So it's a lot of power in a small unit, but the drawback is a quite high fuel consumption. The piston engine, a V6 Detroit diesel, is the main power for the vehicle for moving, but also for all the hydraulics that comes from this engine. 290 horsepower is not a lot, but it's enough for using the tank on flat ground. A reliable engine, and the reason why we lifted the power pack this time from this tank is because the starter on the bottom of the engine didn't work, so we needed to get to the starter to enable to change it. With the power pack inside the vehicle, it's not possible even to see or reach the starter. So that's the reason why we lifted it, and it's only 3 bolts to undo the starter to change that, and then we will put it back into the tank again. So this is the engine bay of the tank with the power pack removed. And what you will see on the inside is a lot of dirt and oil, as normally is in engine bay of a tank. But we also see a lot of components that you normally do not find in an ordinary tank engine bay, and I will point out a few of those what we actually see in this tank. So when these tanks were in use, there were a lot of problems with different components, hydraulic system, the electronics, etc. So you could say this is the plumber's nightmare. It's a lot of hoses, pipes and components everywhere, and it's not so easy to get to them. So you need to lift the power pack in order even to reach these components. But as we've seen, it's not very difficult to lift the power pack, so you need to do that from time to time. The power pack needs fuel, coolant and airflow, and the airflow for both engines comes from the outside of the power packs in the vehicle itself, with the filters on each side of the tank. The fuel system is combined with 2 fuel tanks at the rear and 1 at the front of the tank. So they are connected, and from there you get the fuel to both the engines. The piston engine also has a coolant system which goes outside of the power pack. At the rear there are 2 radiators with 2 fans driven by hydraulic engines. So all of the coolant system is outside of the power pack itself. So there's a lot of things using in the vehicle itself. So the power pack itself is only the engines and gearboxes. At the front of the vehicle we can see the final drives, part of the steering and the brakes for using the clutch and brake steering system, and also for the main brakes. In front of the steering there is the front fuel tank. And these two brakes, they are quite crucial that they are in good condition, since when you're doing the clutch and brake steering, there is a lot of wear on the brakes when they break down the side of the tank in order to turn it 90 degrees. That was it about the mobility, the power pack, and how it looks on the inside of this fantastic tank. Hit the like button and please write a comment if you would like to see something more, and follow us for the future episodes of our collection.